All right, let's talk about what we consider our vascular system. There are different parts of it. We're going to focus on what we call systemic circulation and not focus so much on what we consider pulmonary circulation. We talked about that in respiratory, pulmonary circulation, blood going to the lung, leaving lung, going back to the heart. We're going to focus on what we call systemic circulation. And I want to make this clear to you that systemic circulation, that's the blood going to all the different tissue in your body. All right, so where does it start? It starts right here at the aorta. Okay, as soon as that left ventricle ejects blood right into the aorta, once it hits that aorta, now we're talking about blood in the systemic circulation. All right, blood hits the aorta, the largest actual artery we have in our body. And like I said in lecture, it's just like a tree trunk scenario. That's what it is, because the whole vascular system is like that tree, especially when we're just specifically looking at what we call the arteries, the arterial portion, which is taking all the blood away from the heart. By definition, that's what an artery is, right? Taking blood away from the heart. By definition, that's an artery. All right, so it's like a tree. We have our tree trunk, which is the aorta, and then we have a whole bunch of branches that are going to branch from that trunk, and those are arteries. And then you have even smaller branches that branch from those branches, which are called arterioles. You have way more arterioles than arteries. All right, you see, just like you see on a tree, with the really, really, really small branches. And then what's going to be at those really small branches? At the end of that will be leaves. Okay, and that's your tissue. But what do you have in those leaves? If you look at any leaf, you'll see these little small vessels there that are actually distributing all of the nutrients and everything the actual plant needs to the actual leaf. All right, so those the smallest vessels we have in the systemic circulation or pulmonary circulation, those small vessels that are right there where the tissue is, that's called capillaries. All right, really small. That's the smallest portion, right? From the aorta all the way down to the capillary, what we have to the arteriole, we have the wall of these actual vessels that are actually made of smooth muscle. What's inside those walls is smooth muscle. Do you have any control of that? No, we've been through that before, right? We understand the only type of muscle we have control over, to most of the time, is the skeletal muscle. And so smooth muscle you have no control over, right? So that's what makes up the walls of your arteries. What lines these actual vessels is epithelial cells. Okay, we actually call them endothelial cells. Right? And then what's covering this actual organ, like I said, we'll always come across that, right? Connective tissue. Right, so that's the order of what makes up the wall of your actual blood vessels. And that's the lining of it is epithelial cells. And you remember chapter 4, we said what does epithelial tissue do? It either lines or covers, right? So it's lining these vessels. And those epithelial cells are called endothelial cells. And then we have our middle portion of this wall, which is basically smooth muscle. And then we have the outer portion of it, which is connective tissue. All right. What's a great deal, what type of connective tissue is in, especially this largest artery we have, aorta, is elastic tissue. Elastic tissue. So don't forget that feature of elasticity. And what is elastic tissue? A lot of elastic fibers are in there, so they are going to give that property, what we call elasticity. So as soon as the aorta actually does what? Takes on all of that blood from the left ventricle, then it actually what? Stretches, but just like your rubber band. It's not just going to stretch, but what? It's going to recoil. And that's where it's going to be able to push blood to where it has to go. Okay? It's going to be able to push blood to all the what? Different tissues in your body. Right? So that's a great tissue that is in the right place, right? Which is right there in the walls, a part of the wall of your vessels. Right? Now, but once you get down to the arterial, it's not so much of that elastic tissue, mostly just the smooth muscle, right? And so that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. We're going to look at that in this particular video as it relates to what arterioles do. It's right here at this level, but they're going to be something great as it relates to controlling what we call blood pressure. Because what makes up most of arterioles walls, what makes up most of what we call arterial walls, all right, is smooth muscle. All right? And smooth muscle is going to be able to actually change the diameter of these arterioles. And that's going to change something very important as it relates to blood pressure. So we're going to look at that. But once we get down to capillaries, the wall doesn't have any smooth muscle, right? Hardly any connective tissue. The wall is basically just the epithelial cell itself. All right, and so what are those epithelial cells called again? They're called endothelial cells, okay? And those endothelial cells have spaces in between them, and those spaces in between them are called fenestrations. Okay? So fenestrations. Those fenestrations, those actual pores, right between, what are that? Typically, epithelial cells are right there next to each other. Remember, we talked about that with chapter 4, tight junctions. And keep them together, right, in your desmosomes, but you don't have that necessarily with your endothelial cells, and that's why some space between. That's good, though, because that's what's going to allow a lot of different things out, right? Like what? Oxygen and what? Nutrients, okay? So where's that? Going to go right to the actual tissue, which is made of cells. Cells take all that, live, right? So that's what this is all about, right? And that's your actual, just describing what your capillary is and what we consider our systemic circulation, right? This is systemic circulation, all right? And where does it start? It starts at the aorta, all right? Goes through that tree, okay? Goes to capillaries, gives all the oxygen and nutrients, and then we're actually going to have a major waste product that's created, which is CO2, which now goes right back into the capillary. Right, so, and then all of that blood now goes to what we call a venule, vein, vena cava, and back to the actual heart. Right? Which side of the heart? The right side. In the beginning chamber is called the atria, so the right atria. So where does systemic circulation end? It ends at the right atria. All right, so where does systemic circulation begin? At the aorta. And then where does it end? The right atria. All right? So that's actually what we consider your systemic circulation. And your parts of that is your artery, your veins, and your arteries take blood away from the heart. Your veins take blood to the heart. Right? And there is a difference in the consistency of the walls of your artery versus veins. Your artery walls, like I said, plenty of smooth muscle in it. But veins, not much at all. Right? In fact, you touch an artery, it's like touching a straw. Right? There's some pressure that gives back to you there. Right? But if you're talking about a straw that's been used or overused, you press down on it, nothing gives back. Right? It's just flat. Right? And that's your vein. Right? Nothing actually there. Nothing there to actually give it any actual integrity there. So that's what we're talking about as far as veins. They'll really collapse easily. All right? And so, yes, nothing there to kind of push blood along. And that's why it's very important that veins have valves in them. Okay? Their veins have valves in them. So as soon as blood gets to a certain point, okay, the blood can't come back down, right? It's making sure these valves are making sure blood just goes in that one direction. Right? So no valves in arteries, but you have valves in veins, okay? And so what else helps push blood through with veins, okay, is where veins are. Like we saw when we actually did dissection of the cat, it's actually looked between the gracilis and sartorius. How did I know? It was actually some actual fascia between them because I saw a vein there. It's called the femoral vein. So where are veins? They're in between muscles. So actually what's going to happen when muscles contract? They're going to what? push those what? Those veins, right? And now that's what pushes blood up to where it belongs, right? So what's going to actually push blood? Skeletal muscle contraction, right? So whenever you contract muscle, skeletal muscle, that's what I'm doing right now. If I actually stand on my toes, right? I'm contracting my gastrocnemius, right? And so what is that? What's happening now? We're actually getting veins, right? They're compressing on those veins, pushing blood up to where it belongs, which is to the actual heart. All right, and so that's how your actual blood is going to be pushed from veins. So we have to be careful with that. If you do not use muscles, no muscular usage, right? Then that means blood is just going to pool in veins. Right? So a lot of blood, a lot of times, is pooled there. Most of the blood in your body ends up there in veins, right? Because it doesn't push blood well. It doesn't push blood well at all, right? So that's why we got to keep our muscles contracted. Keep contracting your muscles. So for the elderly, it's especially very important that you keep them ambulating, right? So that way they contract their muscles, they push their blood to the heart, right? That's going to have great circulation then, all right? Very good. So that's what we're looking at with our vascular system here, all right? And those are the parts of that system, right? Your actual beginning portion of your systemic circulation, the aorta, then branches out to arteries. Even the smaller branches are called arterioles. And then we have our capillary, distributing the actual oxygen and nutrients to tissue. And we have actual capillary portion that takes on and sucks all of that fluid out of tissue into venules and then to veins. All right, and then a whole bunch of veins dump all of that into that one largest vein called the vena cava. You have a superior portion and an inferior portion. So we call it the superior vena cava, then the inferior vena cava, right? So that's your actual vascular system, that's systemic circulation. All right, and so let's take a peek at how these arterioles are going to actually create an interesting scenario there related to changing blood pressure. All right, very good.